I had been driving all night, trying to make it to my sister's house by morning. My eyes were heavy, and every mile felt longer than the last. When I saw the flickering neon sign of a small motel up ahead, I decided it was time to rest. I pulled in and was relieved to see a vacancy sign in the window. The motel looked like it hadn't been updated in decades, but I didn't care. I just needed a bed. The man at the front desk was old and moved slowly, as if time itself didn't mean much to him. He handed me a key with the number 7 on it and pointed down a dim hallway. The room was simple, but clean enough. I dropped my bag on the floor, turned off the light, and crawled into bed. The sheets were cold and stiff, but I was too tired to care. I closed my eyes and let sleep take over. I woke up to a noise. It was faint at first, something like scratching outside my door. I listened, but it stopped. I turned over, trying to shake the feeling that something wasn't right. But as soon as I started to drift off again, the scratching returned. It seemed to be louder and closer. I sat up in bed and listened. The sound wasn't coming from outside. It was in the room. I reached for the light, but the switch didn't work. The sound became a lot louder. I stumbled out of bed and fumbled for my phone, using the screen to light the room. But when I did, I saw a door in the corner that hadn't been there before. It was slightly open, a dim light seeping through the crack. The sound was coming from inside. Every instinct told me to leave, but something pulled me towards the door. I took a step closer, then another. My hand shook as I reached for the knob, pushing the door open. The light was blinding at first, but then I saw it, a small room, completely empty, except for a mirror on the wall. I stepped inside, unable to resist. A reflection blew back at me, but something was wrong. The face in the mirror didn't look right. I stumbled back, but the door slammed shut behind me. The light flickered, and the scratching returned, louder and more frantic. I pounded on the door, screaming for help, but nobody came. The room began to spin, the walls closing in. I felt my mind slipping, the sounds filling my head until I could no longer think. And then, everything went dark. When I woke up, I was lying on the floor of the motel room, drenched in sweat. The door to the strange room was gone. I ran out of the motel, not stopping until I was in my car and driving as fast away as I could. I never looked back. When Josh and I decided to take a spontaneous road trip, we didn't plan much ahead. It was supposed to be a fun, carefree adventure, a break from our everyday lives. We left the city with just a backpack each and a few snacks. The day was filled with laughter, loud music, and pit stops at quirky roadside diners. We had no clue how dark our journey would turn. As night fell, the thrill of the road trip started to wear off, and we realized we had no place to stay. We were in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by endless woods and winding roads. Our phones lost signal hours ago, and we hadn't seen another car for miles. The thought of sleeping in the car crossed my mind, but Josh, ever the optimist, insisted we'd find something else. We finally spotted a motel sign in the distance. It was old, almost ancient looking, with peeling paint and cracked windows. But we were too tired to be picky. The parking lot was empty except for a rusty old truck. I hesitated, but Josh was already out of the car, heading towards the office. The receptionist was an old man, thin and pale. He smiled and said, "Last room available." He said it in a raspy voice, handing us a single rusty key. I noticed the key had the number 13 on it, but before I could say anything, Josh took it, thanking the man. Room 13 was at the end of a long, dimly lit hallway. The walls were lined with faded stained wallpaper, and the carpet squished under our feet as we walked. When we reached the door, I felt a cold draft, even though it was the middle of summer. I shivered, but Josh, ever the brave one, unblocked the door and pushed it open. The room was small, barely enough space for 2 twin beds, and the air smelled stale, like it hadn't been aired out in years. The wallpaper was peeling, and the only light came from a flickering bulb in the corner. But we were too tired to care. We tossed our bags on the floor and collapsed onto our beds. I tried to sleep, but something felt off. The room was too quiet, and the shadows seemed to move on their own. I kept hearing strange noises, whispers, faint footsteps, and what sounded like scratching behind the walls. Every time I turned on the lights, the noise stopped. I couldn't shake the feeling that we weren't alone. Josh, on the other hand, was out like a light. I envied him, wishing I could just close my eyes and forget the weird vibes of this place. But as the hours dragged on, the noises grew louder and more insistent. I sat up, heart pounding, and glanced over at Josh's bed. He was gone. I bolted upright, calling his name, but there was no answer. The room felt like it was closing in on me. The wall was pulsing with each beat of my heart. I scrambled for the door, but it wouldn't budge. My breath caught in the back of my throat as I heard the whispering again, this time right behind me. I finally managed to push the door open and ran for the car, but it was gone. I waited outside all night for the next bus to come and got out of there. And I never saw Josh ever again. I was on a road trip, trying to clear my head after a rough breakup. The drive had been long, and I was exhausted by the time I saw the sign for a roadside motel. It was an old place, the kind that looked like it had seen better days, but I didn't care. I just needed a place to crash for the night. The clerk at the front desk was an older woman, her hair tied back in a tight bun. She barely looked up from her book as she handed me the key and told me my room was number 12, down the hall to the left. I found the room easily enough. The door creaked as I pushed it open, revealing a small, musty room with faded wallpaper and a single bed. It wasn't much, but it would do. I tossed my bag on the bed, kicked my shoes off, and lay down, hoping for some much-needed sleep. I must have dozed off because the next thing I knew, I was waking up to the sound of footsteps outside my door. I sat up, listening intently. The footsteps stopped, and everything went silent. I thought it was probably just another guest, maybe someone who couldn't sleep. But then the doorknob started to turn. My heart raced as I watched it twist. I jumped out of bed and grabbed my phone, ready to call for help, but the door didn't open. Instead, the footsteps continued down the hall, fading into the distance. I stood there, shaken, but eventually convinced myself it was just somebody who had got in the wrong room. I tried to shake it off and went back to bed, but sleep didn't come easy. Later, I woke up again, this time to a cold breeze. The window was open, though I was sure I'd closed it before lying down. I got up to shut it, but as I did, I noticed something odd. The door to the room across the hall was open. It was pitch black inside, but I could see a figure standing there, just beyond the threshold. I froze, my hand on the window latch. The figure didn't move, didn't make a sound. It just stood there, staring at me. Or at least I thought it was staring. I couldn't see a face, only a shadowy outline. Terrified, I shut the window, locked it, and backed away from the door. I sat on the bed, gripping my phone, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst. I wanted to run, but I couldn't bring myself to open the door, not with that thing outside. I spent the rest of the night sitting on the bed, staring at the door, waiting for something to happen. But nothing did. The figure never moved, never made a sound. When the first light of dawn finally crept through the window, I grabbed my things and bolted out of the room. The hallway was empty, The door across the hall was closed, just as it had been when I first arrived. I rushed to the front desk to check out, desperate to get out of there. The clerk, a different person this time, looked at me with a concern as I handed back the key. "You were in room 12, she asked, glancing at the computer screen. "Yeah, why?" I replied. She frowned and said, "There is no room 12. I left without another word, driving away as fast as I could. I didn't stop until I was miles away. Even now, I can't explain what happened in that motel, but I know one thing for sure. I'll never stay in a place like that, ever again. Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe, and check out my other horror stories on the screen now. And until next time, sleep tight.